Hey everybody, Sam here from Sugar Spun Run, and today I'll be showing you how to make my favorite chocolate cake. Every good baker needs a classic, staple, no-fail chocolate cake recipe in their recipe box. This one is mine, and today I'm really excited to show you exactly how I make it. The first thing you'll want to do is preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and we can begin. You'll need a large bowl, and we'll add 1 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour. Next, we'll add our sugar. We are going to be using white sugar and brown sugar for this recipe. I find that the brown sugar helps give this chocolate cake a really nice flavor and helps make it just a little more moist. We'll use a cup of tightly packed light or dark brown sugar, and we'll also add a cup of granulated sugar. Next, add 3/4 cup of natural cocoa powder, 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking soda, and 3/4 teaspoon of salt. Now this chocolate cake recipe can be stirred together completely by hand, but I'm going to be using my electric hand mixer today, and if you have a stand mixer, you can certainly use that instead. We'll just stir the dry ingredients until they're well combined. Now you'll find that a lot of chocolate cake recipes will use either all butter or all oil. They don't usually use both. I love using both because I find that the oil helps give the cake that nice moist texture, while the butter helps give it a really nice flavor. Today I'm going to be using 1/2 cup of melted unsalted butter, and I'm also going to use a 1/2 cup of canola or vegetable oil. Now we'll use our mixer to stir everything together until the oil and butter are well incorporated into the dry ingredients. Okay, with those well combined, now we can grab our eggs. This recipe uses 2 large eggs as well as 1 large egg yolk. The reason we're going to be using an additional yolk is because that helps give this cake that nice, fudgy, moist texture. We'll add these to the batter one at a time, beating until combined after each addition. And now we'll add 2 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract. As you can see, this batter is still pretty thick, but we are about to change that by adding our buttermilk and our coffee or hot water. We will start with the buttermilk. You are going to need 1 cup for this recipe, and if you don't have buttermilk on hand, I do have a very simple buttermilk substitute you can use, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. Now, I do recommend using buttermilk that's at room temperature, so what I like to do is I'll set my buttermilk out about an hour or so before I begin making this cake. Now, the next thing that my chocolate cake recipe calls for is a 1/2 cup of hot coffee. If you don't have hot coffee on hand, you can use hot water. It will work just as well. The hot liquid is going to help bloom your cocoa powder and give your cake the best, richest chocolate flavor. Now, the reason I recommend using hot coffee instead of just water is because the coffee is really going to enhance that chocolate flavor. I really love the way it brings out the rich chocolate tones in this cake, so I really recommend it. It won't make your cake taste like coffee, so don't worry about that, but I always recommend using hot coffee. So I'll add a 1/2 cup of hot coffee to my batter. Now, because I'm not a coffee drinker, I don't actually keep coffee in my house. What I do keep is a jar of instant coffee in my pantry, and whenever I'm making this chocolate cake, I will just dissolve a teaspoon of that instant coffee in a 1/2 cup of hot water and stir it together really well, and it works wonders for this cake. And this coffee is really going to help thin out our batter, but we are going to want to start stirring it slowly to incorporate that hot coffee without splattering our batter everywhere. Then, once the coffee is incorporated, you can increase your speed to medium or high and make sure everything's well combined. Now, it is important that our ingredients be nicely combined for this chocolate cake, so I like to pause about halfway through stirring everything with my electric mixer and use a spatula to scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl just to make sure that everything gets really well combined. And then I'll just give this one more stir with my mixer so everything is really well incorporated. Now that our batter is prepped, we can portion this into our cake pans. I will be using 8-inch cake pans for this recipe. If you want to use 9-inch, you certainly can. You will just need to bake the cakes for a little less time. And I have greased and floured the sides of the cake pan. And what I'm going to do is I will take these parchment paper rings or circles that I've cut out, and I'll press them into the bottom of the cake pan. This is going to ensure that your cake does not stick when it's finished baking. And now I'll just evenly divide our cake batter into these 2 pans. You'll notice that this batter is pretty thin. That's totally okay. It is supposed to look like this. Now we'll bake our chocolate cakes in our 350 degree Fahrenheit oven for about 35 to 40 minutes. As I mentioned, if you're using 9-inch pans instead of 8-inch, you're going to want a little less time. I'd probably start checking the cakes at about 30 minutes. The best way that I found to check if a cake is done is to use the toothpick test. What I do is I insert a toothpick into the center of the cake, and when I remove the toothpick, I like for it to have a few moist, fudgy crumbs on it. This should not have any wet batter on the toothpick. That would mean the cake still needs more time, but if there are crumbs on it, it usually means it's just about done. If you get a clean toothpick, that cake is definitely done. Take it out of the oven. Once your chocolate cakes have finished baking, you'll want to let them cool for about 10 to 15 minutes in their cake pan. Then, once they've cooled, grab a butter knife and run that along the outside of the cake to help loosen it from the pan. Now we'll take a cooling rack and we will carefully invert our chocolate cake onto our cooling rack. Now we'll let it cool completely on the rack before covering with frosting. Once your chocolate cake is cooled completely, now you can cover it with frosting. For today's recipe, I am going to be using my all-time favorite chocolate frosting. This is a really simple recipe. If you want to make it for your own cake, I will drop the recipe link in the description below so you can get it there. Now, because this cake typically bakes up pretty flat, I usually don't level it off. You can if you want to, but for me, I found that it makes a nice, pretty even cake. Now with most of my cakes, I like to do a light crumb coating before I fully frost them. What this is it's just a thin coating of frosting around the outside of the cake. I just use a little bit of frosting and use my spatula to make sure it's nice and smooth. And then I'll transfer my cake to the fridge for about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, pull it out, and when I finish frosting it, now my crumb coating has caught all of my crumbs, and now I can frost the cake without getting any crumbs in the final frosting layer. Once your cake is chilled for about 10 to 15 minutes, now you can finish frosting. All right, now your cake is ready to serve, but I do like to usually top mine off with sprinkles, so I'm going to add some of those to the top of the cake. All right, now it is time to dig in. I'm gonna cut myself a nice slice of this cake. I hope you guys can tell from the computer screen just how fudgy and moist and rich this chocolate cake really is. I am not lying when I say I love this texture. It is one of the best textures of any chocolate cake I've ever made or ever eaten, and it's made completely from scratch. I hope you guys will try out this recipe, and if you do, please let me know what you think. I would love it if you would subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.